Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Every day, 1 billion people get in their cars, take a drive, head to the store, to work, to the ball field. It doesn't matter where they're going. They're releasing carbon into our atmosphere. We're all aware of global warming, what it theoretically is doing to our way of life, our environment, and the release of carbon being the #1 cause of this global warming. Our biggest combatant to that is the planting of trees, whether it be on a residential level or on a commercial level, which you and I typically wouldn't have normally a whole lot to do with. I've been a certified arborist for about 13 years now, been working with trees longer than that. I probably would have a little bit more on a commercial end than you would, but that still gives you the option on the residential part. And if we had everybody on a residential level just to contribute a little bit along the way, I think we could make a difference. Being in the tree business, I have had an opportunity to plant quite a few trees, and I've had to take down quite a few trees along the way. Sometimes for safety issues, sometimes just for cosmetic, which you hate to say that, but if you want to stay in the business, if a customer wants it down just because they don't like looking at it, then that's essentially what you have to do. But that's not necessarily the issue. Is if we were to go back and plant other trees to replace those ones that have been taken down. And that's something that we don't always do. I mean, we may cut down a tree because we don't like the way that it looks or it's in a bad spot, but we never think far enough ahead to go ahead and put another tree, maybe in a different suitable location, different from where that one was, or just so we don't have that issue again. But sometimes something always comes up and we never get around to that point. But we should. And I think that's a big issue as far as the residential planting of trees. There's a lot of benefits. I mean, not only do you have the cosmetic effect or the neighbors admiring your tree, but I mean the value to a good tree. I mean, shade, something for the kids to play in. There's a lot of additional values that if we planted for those values, we would get the carbon storage that a tree provides, and not even, we'd get an immediate effect, but we would also get an effect with the carbon storage that maybe we wouldn't look at, but it would still be there. I mean, we always want to do a lot to improve our homes, and that's always a good item to start with. But we always seem to take more than we need to down when it comes time to take trees down for one reason or another. Another big contributor to our taking trees down is a lot of commercial end when you've got to build a new house, new shopping center, new road, utility purposes. I interviewed a master arborist, Nathan works for a local utility company, and he told me that it'd be nothing on an average day for his crew to take down 100 trees in a utility easement project. And I mean, most of us on a residential level wouldn't take down 100 trees over the span of owning a home. I mean, that's phenomenal. Who's planting these trees back? They're not going to. I mean, they're there to do a job to get the easement cut out, and I mean, they're not required, nor are they going to go back and reseed anything in a different location. And somebody has to offset what we're cutting down. I mean, the beauty of the carbon storage in every tree that you plant, whether it's a good-looking tree, naturally the faster it grows, the quicker it's going to start storing the carbon. And through the process of photosynthesis, I mean, that tree is going to take in the carbon dioxide. It's going to give us good oxygen back out, and it's gonna restore, store the actual carbon that it takes in, and it'll store it throughout what would be considered biomass, which would be most of your tissue within any plant or tree. And we don't really see that. I mean, the rings that you actually see within the tree are what are considered carbon rings. The carbon is what actually makes that visible. But there's just, I mean, whether it's industry, whether it's commercial, whether it's progress, I mean, the industry is set up now to where, I mean, if you're a company that you emit too much carbon, then you offset. You can buy what they consider carbon credits now. You can buy them monetarily. You can trade them off. If you're an industry that does more to reduce the carbon than you actually emit, then you actually get the credits, and you can keep them in case you need them, or you can monetarily sell them to another company. Or, I mean, they've got things now. Well, we've increased the parts per million in the last 50 years, which there's no real layman's terms for that scenario, but roughly 30% more carbon is going into the Earth's atmosphere than it was in 1950. And they say, and I say they, scientists say that carbon remains within the atmosphere for roughly 50 years. I'm not exactly sure how they have determined that, but theoretically, if it does, I mean, we're still showing the effects of carbon from the 1960s. So we need to do something to just try to absorb some of that carbon out of our atmosphere before it does destroy the atmosphere to a point where we can't do anything about it. I mean, we're all aware of what they say the effects are, the rising seas, the natural disasters that we didn't experience 25 years ago. And it's hard to say whether they are effects of this global warming. I mean, in geological terms, our records go back 100 years as far as disasters, temperatures, what have you. I mean, in geological terms, that's nothing. So, I mean, if it is connected or if it's not connected, I mean, that's still yet to be determined. And there's a lot of great scientists out there that, with the evidence they have, they think that it is related. We hear every day about the melting of the ice caps. I mean, something's causing that. It's not just occurring for no reason. And I mean, the proof as far as the actual temperature rising, it's there. 1 degree the last 30 years, which is pretty significant. And over a long span, I mean, it would be more significant. So we know that something is there, and we do know that it is the carbon is destroying the actual atmosphere. So on a residential level, if we were to be planting more trees, we could actually reduce the amount of carbon that is actually left into the atmosphere, that is not absorbed by one tree or another, or one plant or another. Typically, an acre of corn actually takes out 1 metric ton per 6 months, which is pretty significant. But I mean, that requires a lot of acres of corn. There's a lot of trees out there. I mean, there are trees that we can utilize, but there's not enough. That's the bottom line. We need to have more. And on a small level, if every home planted 1 or 2 trees a year, I mean, that would be significant just across our country, not even including countries elsewhere, but just across ours. We speak of a further down the line, 1 generation, 2 generation. We don't know how soon that this imprint would be seen as far as our children, our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren. But I mean, there are solutions out there. I mean, there are a lot more advantages to planting trees residentially. I mean, you take the shade of a tree alone next to a residence. On the south side, in the summertime, reduce the temperature of your house. We've got a twofold here advantage. Not only does it reduce the temperature of your house, that means that's less electricity that you would be using, because that's less you have to cool your house, which in turn is less emissions from the fuel that is used to produce your electricity. So I mean, the same thing goes in the wintertime with the windbreak. I mean, it helps out all the way through. Dr. Bill Friedman wrote in an article, Carbon Sequestration, states that within the U.S., the biomass alone, which is all the plants and trees, create a carbon sink, which is just an area that actually stores more and filters more than it actually emits. But he states that the biomass of the U.S. offsets over 15% more than it emits, just in the U.S. Of course, now you take other countries that aren't quite as located with areas of forest. I mean, it's hard to really put a number on that. But we as a country and our forest and our trees are doing a pretty good job. But imagine if we had more trees on a residential level. I mean, the EPA states that, an article titled Reducing Heat Urban Islands, that a suburban area that has mature trees is 4 to 6 degrees Fahrenheit lower in temperature in the summertime than the suburbs, a new area that has no mature trees. And that's pretty significant. I mean, that's a lot of temperature, and I mean, depends on what location you're at. That would be pretty significant. But in conclusion, I think that if we get together and we spread the word and we make it a point to once, twice, 3 times a year plant a tree, doesn't really matter what kind of tree it is. It doesn't really matter where it's located, but something that would absorb some of this carbon that every day when we go out and every day when we turn the lights on, something that will absorb some of this that each and every one of us are putting into the atmosphere. I think that if we spread the word and did what we could ourselves, I think eventually we could make a bigger imprint in the reduction of this carbon release into our atmosphere. Thank you very much for listening.